Hi, boys and girls. I'd like to see if you can listen to the story, What is Color? And answer questions based on what's in the story and some of the vocabulary. To get you going, can you remember who our two new characters were in the story the last time we read it? Turn to your neighbor and see if you can tell them. Okay, you should have said that the main characters were Ethan and Amy, Samuel's grandchildren. So let's think about what happened in the story. What did Ethan and Amy see at the fair that had to do with reflection and refraction? Here's a hint. Today, we're going to get warmed up for today's story by asking you a series of questions or statements starting with raise your hand if. I want you to raise your hand if the statement is true about light. Here we go. Raise your hand if light can travel through an opaque object like a book. Now, raise your hand if light bends when it travels through a glass of water. You should raise your hand. Raise your hand if eyeglass lenses are transparent. You should raise your hand. A flat bathroom mirror on the wall is a convex mirror. No hands raised. A convex lens magnifies an object. You should raise your hands on that one. Raise your hand if light changes direction when it passes through a lens. You should have your hands raised. Raise your hand if light speeds up when it goes through certain objects. No hands for that one. Light slows down when it goes through objects. Now raise your hand if you can always see a clear image when looking through a translucent object. No hands for that one. And finally, raise your hand if a flat mirror on the wall is a plane mirror. You should raise your hands for that one. Okay, look at this image. It shows all types of light energy that are produced by the sun and make their way through space to Earth. Some light energy is visible to us, and some of the light waves are invisible to us. The visible light is what allows us to see the world as we do. Remember that you may already know about some invisible light types of light energy, like X-rays is one you know. You also have heard about ultraviolet light and infrared light. What do you see in this image? Have you ever seen a rainbow? Where did you see a rainbow? Talk to your neighbor for about 30 seconds about what this image shows you and where you've seen it, where you've seen a rainbow. Okay, now think about this. What does this image and this image have in common? What do you think causes a rainbow? You're going to be listening to a story to find out more about light and to see if your predictions about what causes a rainbow are correct. Now here's some words you're going to hear. One of the words you're going to need is optometrist. An optometrist is a doctor who examines people's eyes to check if their vision needs to be corrected in any way by wearing glasses or contact lenses or by a medical treatment. Here's another word you need. X-ray. Remember that X-rays are a powerful invisible ray of energy that can pass through an object and make it possible to see inside of it. A picture that shows what makes up the inside of something, like such as the bones in a skeleton, we also call an X-ray image. Okay, here's our story for today. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and Samuel had invited Amy, Ethan, and Jack to breakfast. It had been 3 days since Samuel had seen Jack and his grandchildren, because he had traveled to the city to a special hospital to have his eyes checked by an optometrist. Do you remember what an optometrist is? Can you figure it out from what I just told you? Samuel set up 2 extra easels in the garden next to his easel. He was trying to encourage his grandchildren to paint with them. He had long since given up trying to get Jack to take up painting as a hobby. When he was at the hospital, the optometrist had advised Samuel to rest his eyes, but he found it difficult to give up his daily trip to the garden to paint. Amy and Ethan arrived first. They really enjoyed having breakfast with their grandfather. Samuel always served homemade pancakes, eggs, sausages, bacon, and hash browns. The breakfasts were always amazing. "Hey, Granddad," yelled Ethan, "I'm starving. Is breakfast ready?" "I doubt you're actually starving," replied Samuel, "but it's almost ready, just scrambling the eggs." Moments later, Jack arrived, just in time to help Samuel serve the breakfast feast. What's a synonym for the word feast? Once the food had been served, Alfie arrived in the kitchen with the hope of getting a tasty morsel. Samuel pretended to be strict about feeding Alfie from the table, but in truth, he liked to spoil him. "You've outdone yourself," said Jack appreciatively. He too enjoyed Samuel's famous breakfasts. "What's the plan for today?" asked Jack, hoping that there wouldn't actually be one. "Well, I'm going to make these 2 monkeys work a little," said Samuel, grinning. "They are going to have a painting lesson, and all 3 of you are going to have a lesson on the science of color." "That just means he's going to talk a lot," announced Jack. The children laughed. Samuel, Jack, and the children spent the next hour eating, talking, and enjoying each other's company. Ethan secretly reached down under the table and fed Alfie small pieces of sausage, though Samuel was perfectly aware of what he was doing. Then, after loading the dishwasher and tidying up the kitchen, they made their way out into the garden. Listen carefully for adjectives and adverbs that make the scene more vivid. Samuel had set the easels up under the shade of a large apple tree. Once everyone was settled, including Alfie, he advised the children to pick a subject to paint, something they could clearly see and would enjoy painting. "Well, I'd like to paint the bird feeder," announced Ethan. "I think I'll paint that potted geranium," said Amy, pointing to a plant with vivid red petals sitting snugly in a terracotta pot. "I've chosen to sit here and close my eyes," said Jack, and then promptly did just that. So what adjectives and adverbs did you hear? The first thing I want you to understand, and I've already explained this to Jack, is that waves of light energy race through space from the sun to Earth, Samuel began. Each type of light energy has its own unique wavelength. Okay, we're going to stop here and take a minute to look at this image again. Do you see the tops of these waves in the graphic? A wavelength is the distance between 2 crests or tops of 2 waves. Some wavelengths, like this one here, is longer than other wavelengths, like these here. Do you see the place where it says microwave wavelengths and X-ray wavelengths? Can you tell me which type of invisible light has a longer wavelength? Microwave or X-ray? If you said microwave, you're right. Let's get back to the story. We cannot see all of the sun's light energy, but the energy we can see is called visible light. White light is made up of a spectrum of all the colors we see in visible light. Okay, remember, a spectrum is a series or a range of objects, things, or ideas that are arranged in a particular order. We'll be talking more about spectrum during our word work later. Do you see the visible light part of the chart? This one here. This range of wavelengths, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, are visible to humans without using any special instruments. Do these colors remind you of something? Okay. Some light is invisible, such as X-rays, continued Samuel. Has anyone ever had an X-ray? Whisper to your neighbor if you've had an X-ray or you know someone who has. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay. An X-ray is a powerful, invisible ray of energy that can pass through an object, and special X-ray machines make it possible to see what is inside. Let's get back to the story. That's complicated, chimed in Ethan. Not really, said Samuel. I agree with him, said Jack, opening one eye and pointing at Ethan. Let me finish explaining, and it might make more sense, continued Samuel. We need light to be able to see. Light from the sun travels to Earth. Most of it is invisible to us unless we have equipment like X-ray machines. The visible light shines on objects in the world around us. Some of the light reflects off objects and into our eyes. Then parts of our eyes receive that information and communicate with our brains. The brain figures out what colors we're seeing. However, and this is what's really interesting, said Samuel eagerly, the color of an object is determined by whether the object transmits, reflects, or absorbs light. Sometimes it's a combination. Everyone in the garden is painting now. Oh, it's so much easier to understand now, joked Jack. Let's look at this image. Think of it this way, continued Samuel. Look at the grass. It looks green because it reflects green light waves, but it absorbs the other wavelengths of visible light, meaning it absorbs all the other colors. What does absorb mean? Asked Ethan with a puzzled look on his face. He had by now finished sketching the bird feeder and was dipping his paintbrush into some carefully mixed brown paint. Do you remember what absorb means, everybody? Okay, here it comes. Absorbed light is the light that is soaked up by an object and is therefore no longer visible. The color you see when you look at an object is actually the reflected light. An object has no color if there is no reflected light. Look at the look at the child's red shirt in the image. What wavelength of light is reflecting from the child's shirt? Here's a hint. Now, who can explain why a blue balloon appears to be blue? If you said the balloon is reflecting blue light waves, you're right. When you look at objects of different colors, like green grass or a red shirt or a blue balloon, what can you say about the other visible light waves that hit the objects? Well, if you said they're absorbed by the object, you're right. Okay, back to the story. Oh, I get it, said Amy, who by now was painting the terracotta pot. That's why my art teacher said that black materials absorb all colors of light, and so don't reflect any. So in a way, black isn't a true color. It's more like a lack of light. That's exactly right, Amy, said Samuel. White is the opposite of that. An object that appears white to our eyes reflects all the colors of the spectrum and absorbs none of them. Is that why people say you should wear white clothes in the summertime? Asked Ethan, who was concentrating hard on painting the roof of the bird feeder. Exactly, exclaimed Samuel. White materials reflect most of the light that hits it and absorbs very little. So if you wear white clothing, you tend to stay a little cooler. Can you think about what other energy from light waves, what other energy comes from light waves that makes this true? Well, heat energy comes from light waves from the sun, so white clothes that reflect almost all light waves will be cooler. What happens when you wear black on a sunny day? Well, the black clothing absorbs almost all the light and heat energy from the sun, and that makes you feel warmer. Okay, back to the story. Who would like some ice cream? Asked Jack loudly. He had grown restless and wanted to do something fun. Yay, ice cream, screeched Ethan. Yes, please, said Amy. Here's an interesting question, said Samuel. Which would melt faster, chocolate or vanilla ice cream? The children frowned thoughtfully. Chocolate, called Ethan. And why is that? Asked Samuel. Well, because it's a darker color and would absorb more light, said Amy. Very good, said Samuel. Do you have mint chocolate chip? Asked Ethan. That's my favorite, yelled Jack. Mine too, agreed Ethan. Do you have strawberry ice cream? Asked Amy. I sure do, said Samuel. Samuel didn't need a reply. Jack and the children were already walking toward the kitchen door. They hadn't realized it, but they had been out in the garden for quite some time, and in that time rain clouds had gathered in the distance. Moments later, Samuel, Jack, Amy, and Ethan were sitting at the kitchen table, enjoying double scoops of ice cream. Amy and Ethan had drizzled chocolate sauce on top of theirs. There was even a little small scoop of strawberry ice cream for Alfie, even though Samuel knew he really shouldn't have any. What do you call a ghost mother and father? Asked Ethan as he licked chocolate sauce from around his mouth. I don't know. What do you call a ghost mother and father? Repeated Jack. Transparents, agreed Ethan. Which one runs faster, hot or cold? Ethan continued. Hot. Everyone can catch cold, agreed Amy. You've heard it, said Ethan, sounding disappointed. Okay, how about this one, said Amy. Why is it so hot in a stadium after a football game? Samuel, Jack, and Ethan thought for a while, but couldn't come up with a good enough answer. Okay, Smarty Pants, tell us the answer, said Jack. Well, because all the fans have left, said Amy, clearly delighted with herself. The word clearly is an example of what part of speech? If you said adverb, you are correct. Look at that, said Samuel, pointing through the kitchen window. It's a rainbow, exclaimed Amy. What kind of a word is rainbow? It's a compound word. Why do you think those two words were put together to describe it? Well, you can see rainbows during and after rain, and they're shaped like a bow shape or arc. Okay, back to the story. Oh no, "He's going to tell us how they're formed," said Jack, pointing with his spoon at Samuel. "Well, as a matter of fact," replied Samuel, "a rainbow is a perfect spectrum of colors. We see this spectrum when waves of white light enter millions of falling raindrops, just like the glass of water in the straw. Ethan, the light waves slow down and refract when they come into contact with the transparent raindrops. Essentially, beams of white light break apart into the colors of the rainbow. Each transparent raindrop acts like a prism, perfectly splitting white light into all of its colors," explained Samuel. "Oh, we used prisms in class," shouted Ethan. "It was so cool. It was like making your own rainbow." Do you remember what a prism is? Do you remember our prism experiments earlier in this lesson? What can you tell happens to visible light when it goes through a prism? See if you can whisper it to your neighbor. If you said the light refracts or bends and the different wavelengths separate into colors, you're right. Samuel, Jack, Amy, and Ethan continued to chat and joke and enjoy each other's company. After a while, they returned to the garden, where Samuel continued the painting lesson. He advised the children to pay attention to the angles and qualities of light and shade that hung in the air like soft, clear, transparent wings. He talked to them about texture and tone. All the while, Jack sat in his garden chair and napped. Morning turned into afternoon, and afternoon to early evening. And no one wanted to leave the comfort and shade of the beautiful garden, not even Alfie. Okay, let's take a couple minutes to talk about the story. Were your predictions right about how rainbows are created? Why or why not? Whisper your answer to your neighbor. Here's another question. What is visible light? If you said visible light is light that we can see, you're right. Now, you heard that white light is related to visible light. What is white light made up of? Here's a hint. Remember the name Roy G. Biv. If you said white light is all the colors we can see in visible light, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, you are correct. Now try this one. What type of invisible light was used to create this image? If you said X-ray, you're correct. Let's think about this. How does light travel? Give you a hint. You probably said light travels in waves. So how do we measure light waves? Well, light waves are measured in wavelengths, from the top of one wave to the top of the next one. Now let's think about this. I'm probably wearing my blue shirt. Why does my shirt look blue? If you said the blue-colored shirt absorbs all the colors of white light except for blue light, you're correct. What would cause an object to look black? Well, black is the absence of reflected light that occurs when all the colors of the spectrum are absorbed. Can you describe the spectrum of colors and how it's formed? Turn to your neighbor and take a few seconds to explain it. If you said the spectrum of all the colors of the rainbow, and that when waves of white light are refracted through in just the right way by something transparent, a band of colors appears, you are correct. Okay, now let's do a little think, pair, share. Let's think about the house as the sun is going down. In a completely dark room, is it possible to see colors? Why or why not? Don't share with your neighbor yet. Let's just think about the answer. Okay, now whisper to your neighbor if it is possible to see colors in a completely dark room, and be sure to explain why or why not. Okay, that's it for today. I think you need to come down to the carpet and do some word work on the word spectrum.